Tech Pod. Today, we're going deep.
Deep.
Yeah, deep dive into data privacy,
Oh.
but with a bit of a twist.
Okay.
We're going to be focusing on Chinese tech companies
All right.
that are operating in Europe
Interesting.
and some recent complaints that have been filed against them.
Okay.
We've got a whole stack of articles here
Wow.
from the Economic Times, InfoSecurity Magazine, Reuters, Times of India,
Got it.
all covering the same story.
So,
Are you ready to unpack all this?
absolutely. I think this case could have some pretty big ripple effects.
Yeah.
It really gets to the heart of how we balance data privacy in this globalized digital world.
Okay, so let's just start with the basics. A European privacy advocacy group
Okay.
called NOYB,
NOYB.
which stands for None of Your Business,
I like that.
has filed GDPR complaints against 6 major Chinese tech companies.
6.
Yeah, we're talking TikTok, AliExpress, Shine, Temu, WeChat, and Xiaomi.
Wow, that's quite a list.
What's the issue here? What's got NOYB all riled up?
Well, you're probably familiar with GDPR, the General Data Protection Regulation. But it's worth reminding ourselves why it's such a big deal. I think the EU really set a precedent with this law, aiming to give individuals more control over their data. You know, it covers everything from how companies collect it, how they use it, even where they store it.
Okay.
And that last part, the storage location, that's where things get interesting here.
So it's not just about collecting the data.
Right.
It's about where that data ends up.
Exactly. NOYB is alleging that these Chinese companies are sending European user data back to China.
Okay.
And they're saying that this could be a violation of GDPR.
But data transfers outside the EU aren't completely forbidden under GDPR.
Correct. They are permitted, but there's a catch. The receiving country needs to have what the EU considers adequate data protection standards. And NOYB is essentially arguing that China doesn't meet those standards.
Got it.
Therefore, sending data there puts European users at risk.
So it's like the EU is saying, hey, we have these rules, and if you want to do business with our citizens, you need to play by them no matter where you're based.
Yeah.
I also noticed that some companies are more upfront about this data transfer than others.
Yeah.
For example, AliExpress and Xiaomi, they explicitly state that they transfer data to China. But companies like Temu and WeChat are a bit more vague. You know, they mention third countries, but they don't outright say China.
And that's where NOYB used a really interesting tool from GDPR, the right of access.
Okay.
It allows individuals to request information from companies about how their data is being used.
So NOYB basically said, show me the receipts.
Yeah.
Prove to me that you're not sending our data to China.
Exactly. They wanted concrete evidence. But from what I read, NOYB wasn't satisfied with the responses they received, and that ultimately led to these complaints.
I can see why they'd be frustrated. It's like asking a direct question and getting this roundabout answer. And just to be fair, a Xiaomi spokesperson did tell Reuters that they were reviewing the allegations and would cooperate with authorities.
Right. So it'll be interesting to see how they respond to this pressure. What I find particularly interesting is that this is NOYB's first action against Chinese tech companies.
That is interesting. They've gone after U.S. tech giants like Google and Meta before, but this is a new frontier for them. What do you think that signifies?
I think it highlights a couple of things. First, it shows that NOYB is expanding its focus. They're not just looking at U.S. companies anymore. They're taking on this global tech landscape. Second, it suggests that data privacy concerns are becoming increasingly globalized.
It's like drawing a line in the sand saying these rules apply to everyone regardless of where your headquarters are.
Precisely. And this case could have some major implications for these Chinese companies. The Economic Times reported that NOYB is seeking fines of up to 4% of the company's global sales, which could be massive.
Yeah, we're not talking about a slap on the wrist here. For a company like Temu, that could be a fine of $1.35 billion.
Right.
And it's not like TikTok is a stranger to scrutiny either. The Times of India mentioned that they're already facing a federal ban in the U.S. and are under investigation by the European Commission for potential election interference.
Yeah.
This whole situation feels like a perfect storm brewing.
It really does. We have data privacy concerns colliding with geopolitical tensions and this growing power of these tech platforms. It's going to be fascinating to see how this all plays out.
Okay, so we've got these complaints, potential fines, and a backdrop of heightened scrutiny. But let's step back for a moment and think about what this means for our listeners. Why should they care? Why does this matter for someone who might be using TikTok or shopping on AliExpress?
That's a great question, and I think it's one we all need to be asking ourselves. Think about it. You probably use at least one of these apps.
Yeah.
They're incredibly convenient, but this case forces us to confront the trade-offs.
Yep.
Are we willing to sacrifice some privacy for that convenience? And what responsibility do these companies have to protect our data, even if it means jeopardizing their business model?
So it's not just about these abstract legal battles and fines. It's about the choices we make every day as consumers. Do we prioritize convenience over privacy?
Right.
And how much control do we really have over our data once it's out there?
Exactly. This case brings those questions to the forefront, and it's a conversation we need to be having. Because it's not just about these 6 companies, it's about the future of data privacy in a world where our lives are increasingly intertwined with technology.
It really does feel like a pivotal moment. So let's play predict the future for a bit. What are some potential outcomes of this case? What might happen next?
Well, there are a few possible scenarios. One possibility is that these companies are found to be in violation of GDPR, and they get hit with those massive fines we talked about.
Yeah.
That would certainly send a strong message to other companies operating in Europe that GDPR compliance is not something to be taken lightly.
It would be like the EU saying, we're serious about data privacy and we're willing to back it up with action. But I imagine those companies would fight back, right?
Oh, absolutely. They'll likely challenge any fines or rulings.
Yeah.
And we could see this drag out in court for a long time. It would be a legal battle for the ages.
Legal battles are never fun, but they can sometimes lead to some interesting precedents.
Yeah.
Imagine if this case went all the way to the EU's highest court. What kind of impact could that have?
That would be a landmark decision, no doubt. It could clarify how GDPR applies to companies based outside the EU, especially those in countries with vastly different data privacy laws.
Okay.
We might see a whole new wave of regulations and legal challenges around data transfers.
It would be interesting to see how other countries might react too. Would they follow the EU's lead, or would we see even more fragmentation in how data privacy is handled globally?
That's a key question. This case could spark a global conversation about data privacy and force countries to reevaluate their own laws and regulations. We might even see new international agreements or standards emerge to try and create a more unified approach to data protection.
It feels like the internet was built without borders in mind,
Right.
but now we're trying to retrofit those borders onto this digital world. It's a messy process.
It is. And these issues become even more complex when you factor in the geopolitical tensions between the US, China, and Europe. Data has become a strategic asset, and these countries are vying for control and access.
It's like the new oil, as some people say. Speaking of control, let's talk about what individuals can do. Should we all be deleting TikTok and AliExpress right now to protect our data?
That's a personal decision, ultimately.
Okay.
It comes down to your own risk tolerance and how you value the convenience of these apps versus the potential risks to your data. There's no right or wrong answer here.
It's like any risk assessment.
Mhm.
What are you willing to give up in exchange for the benefits?
Exactly. But it's crucial to stay informed and understand the implications of the choices you make online. You mentioned deleting those apps, but that's just one piece of the puzzle. We need to be thinking more broadly about our digital footprint and how to protect it.
So what are some practical steps people can take to safeguard their data, short of going off the grid entirely?
We'll start with the basics. I know it's tempting to just click agree without reading,
Yeah.
but take the time to understand the privacy policies of the apps and services you use. Pay attention to what data they collect, how they use it, and where it's being sent. It might seem like a tedious task, but it's worth it.
You're right. Those policies can be long and confusing,
Yeah.
but they do contain important information. What else can people do?
Take advantage of privacy settings within those apps. Many apps allow you to limit data collection or opt out of certain features that you might not be comfortable with.
Okay.
It gives you a bit more control over your data.
And I've heard that using privacy-focused browsers and VPNs can add an extra layer of protection too.
Absolutely. Those tools can help mask your online activity and make it more difficult for companies to track your every move. And finally, be mindful of what you share online in general. Think before you post, and remember that once data is out there, it can be difficult to get it back. It's all about being proactive and taking those steps to protect yourself.
This deep dive has been incredibly insightful, and it's clear that this case is just the tip of the iceberg when it comes to data privacy. What's your take on the bigger picture? Where do you see this conversation about data privacy heading in the next few years?
It's the million-dollar question, isn't it? I think we're at a crossroads. On one hand, technology is advancing at an incredible pace, and our lives are becoming more and more intertwined with the digital world. But on the other hand, we're starting to realize the potential downsides of that connectivity, especially when it comes to data privacy.
It's like we're in the wild west of data.
Yeah,
We're just starting to figure out the rules of the game.
that's a great analogy. And I think we're going to see a lot of changes in the coming years. For one, I think we'll see increased pressure on governments and regulators to establish clear rules and frameworks for data governance.
So more laws like GDPR, but maybe on a global scale.
Potentially. It's tricky, though, because different countries have different values and priorities when it comes to data privacy. But I think we'll at least see more international cooperation and dialogue on these issues.
It would be nice to have some sort of global consensus on how to protect data, but I imagine that's easier said than done.
It definitely is, but I'm hopeful. Another trend I see is a rise in privacy-enhancing technologies. Companies are starting to realize that consumers care about privacy, and they're developing tools and services that give individuals more control over their data.
That's encouraging. What kind of technologies are we talking about here?
Things like better encryption anonymization tools, and even new ways of processing data that minimize the collection of personal information.
So it's not just about putting up walls and restricting data flow.
Right.
It's about finding innovative ways to protect privacy while still allowing for the benefits of technology.
Exactly. And I think this is where things get really interesting. We're starting to see a shift from a reactive approach to data privacy, where we try to clean up the mess after the fact, to a more proactive approach, where privacy is baked into the design of products and services from the ground up.
It's like the concept of privacy by design,
Yeah,
building privacy into the DNA of technology.
precisely. And I think this is where the real power lies. If we can create a world where privacy is the default, where it's not an actually thought but a fundamental principle, then we can truly harness the power of technology without sacrificing our fundamental rights.
That's a vision I think we can all get behind. It's not about being anti-technology, it's about being pro-privacy.
Well said. And I think consumers are playing a key role in this shift. They're becoming more aware of data privacy issues, and they're demanding better from the companies they do business with.
They're voting with their wallets, choosing products and services that align with their values.
Exactly. And that's a powerful force for change.
This has been a fantastic deep dive into the world of data privacy, and it's clear that we're just at the beginning of this conversation. What's one key takeaway you hope our listeners will walk away with today?
I think the most important takeaway is that data privacy is not just a technical issue, it's a human rights issue. It's about our right to control our own information, our right to privacy, and our right to live in a world where our digital lives are respected and protected.
Beautifully put. And to our listeners, thank you for joining us on this deep dive. We hope you found it informative and thought-provoking. If this discussion has sparked your interest, we encourage you to do your own research and learn more about GDPR, data privacy, and the rights you have as a digital citizen. Don't forget to like this video and subscribe to ConTechPod for more deep dives into the world of tech and its impact on our lives. Until next time.